Okay, here we are again for another Google Hangout class. I am again here in San Rafael, California, and yeah, just sitting in a nice warm place. I got a little fireplace in front of me, and I brought my guitar again in case I feel to share any songs. And a couple people in the room with me, my friend Anthony and Will. I think Will actually had left for a moment to go do a couple things, but he'll be back. Yeah, we'll just see how this flows. My initial thought for this class was to share, to go into the topic of true empathy, which, oh, hey, well, you're back there. Okay, so I just put you back on mute there for the moment, for the time being. Yeah, the topic that I had thought that I felt like I was just given, that felt like it would be very helpful for today, was the topic of true forgiveness. And I feel to just explore in depth because I think it's really of what A Course in Miracles is teaching. It's ultimately about a very deep um, a deep radical shift in perception where instead of seeing the world as something that can actually cause us to feel pain or pleasure, we begin to open up to the idea that it's really our mind that's causative and that nothing is ever really happening to us, but everything is actually being projected by us. And when I say us, I don't really mean the personal us. It's not like individual, like people are projecting their own world, which is how a lot of psychology often talks about it. And sometimes, we even, as Course in Miracles students, speak about it that way, as if, as in, stop projecting onto me, or I was projecting onto you. And we talk about projection as if it's personal, as if a person is projecting onto another person. But really, what the Course is saying is that the projection is coming from the mind as a whole. We could say the one we share, and that this mind is very, very powerful. It's the mind that was created by God. It's infinite, and it has all the power of God contained in it. But it seems that this mind has sort of fallen asleep. In Course in Miracles, Jesus says often that this world is a dream, that the dreaming of this world is what's keeping us from knowing our true identity as the Christ pure spirit. Oftentimes we speak as if he was the Christ, and the term Christ initially it means the Messiah, but A Course in Miracles uses the word Christ in a different way, terms in a different way. It gives them new meaning. It gives them a meaning that actually fragmented of the sonship of all. It was symbol among all the symbols, one who seemed to awaken to his Christ self first. Jesus and meaning that in his awakening he actually that all of us were with him in spirit. What is metaphysics, but they're very of a of ups and downs, or upset from feelings of, temporary pleasure or excitement or bliss, even
You're cutting in and out.
experiences of depression, anger, just, it's like an age-old question. Lying, how, the question has been around, possible to have consistent peace of mind, of accept our lot
Eric,
as these
Eric,
mostly
Eric.
good.
I can't hear you.
Oh, okay. Oh, it looks like maybe the microphone was. I have my microphone down low. Maybe I'll put it up here. And how is this?
Well, it's better. What's going in and out? You were cutting in and out before.
Okay, it was cutting in and out.
Yeah,
Yeah, maybe
I think that was it because now I can hear it well. Yeah.
Okay, great.
All right. Cool.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, and please interrupt again if anything goes off.
All right,
I
so
also don't know
I missed quite a bit, but probably
Okay,
everybody did too, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's okay. Hopefully it'll show up in the video. Otherwise,
All right.
let's go over things many times, it seems. So just see where the Spirit guides the next part. But yeah, saying that it's a very deep framework that Jesus is teaching in A Course in Miracles about who we are, our origin. In truth, a pure spirit that created God, like an infinite pure spirit, and yet we seem to have fallen and a sense of forgetfulness. We now seem to have amnesia about Christ as spirit. And projection, cosmos, and this is like perceive is a veil that's covering over our true identity. There's let's speak about which, in the the Adam and Eve story, when they came to of there was in the metaphor there was shame and there was a fear of
Eric.
suddenly came over them.
Eric. Again, I'm not hearing.
Is it cutting out again?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Huh. Well, maybe what I'll do, I'm not sure if it's this particular hangout room or that. Yeah. There. Let's see if anything comes to me. If I'm speaking, because I also do sort of. So yeah, it does have a glitch with the.
It's about what? Sorry.
It's my own internet, or trying to troubleshoot here and see if
connection. Okay.
Yeah, it might.
Might be having a bandwidth issue, Eric. If you turn your video off and we just go to sound, that might work.
That could work, yeah. Yeah. Go to sound and see if that works. So I'll turn off your camera as well, Anthony.
Okay.
See if that helps.
It's much clearer.
Okay, now I can. Do you see a button, Anthony, for where you could turn off the your video? It's right near where the mute is, and then we can just try to have it be an audio call. There we go. Okay. Okay, we'll try that. And are you guys able to hear me now? Is it still choppy, or is it coming through?
That's really good.
It's good now, yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. So yeah, this is a perfect example of how, you know, life seems to offer these curveballs where you just don't seem to have any control, and yet, you know, I really, you know, I think in the past I may have felt quite a bit of upset, like, you know, frustration about, well, what's going wrong with the tech, and I've just, I think that what's happened for me over time, which at this point I just really feel like it's kind of funny just to observe the way that life goes up and down. It really gets back to true forgiveness, because forgiveness is really, it allows us to remember that nothing that seems to happen in the dream really has any seriousness at all. It's like the whole trick of time and space was designed to make us believe that we have separated from God, and that what we're experiencing now is very serious. It's very real. It's as if we've cut ourselves off from ever being able to go back to heaven. That's the belief. And now we really need to be careful and do our best to be good people within time and space. I think sometimes, many spiritualities teach that in order to get back to heaven, you have to be good. Basically, that God has a list of people, and He's watching us. And if you do enough good deeds, if you do more good deeds than bad deeds, then you may be allowed to go back to heaven. But you have to be very, very careful, and it's as if life on earth is a very, very serious matter. And A Course in Miracles is really helping us to come to clarity on the fact that it's not a serious matter at all. It really doesn't have the importance. What we do doesn't really have the importance that we have believed that it does. And that really all that matters is that we are willing to forgive and see the falseness of this world, to see through it, to be willing to have our perception transformed. And that's where the peace is. The peace is, it comes from a shift in perception. So it can be quite funny when we start to go deeper into the Course, and we have, we begin to see the value of using every single day and every moment of every day to practice forgiveness. And so I thought maybe I could share a bit about, what it was like for me and how I practiced forgiveness. I think that everybody has their own, techniques or seeming techniques that will be most helpful for them. But of course, the whole workbook of A Course in Miracles is like a forgiveness manual. You could take any of the lessons, any of the 365 lessons in the Course, and use just that lesson as a means for forgiveness, because all of them are ideas that can shift us from perceiving with the ego, which always leads to pain and which always sees a problem, and have us experience a miracle, which would be a sudden shift from thinking with the ego to thinking in line with the Holy Spirit, who doesn't see a problem in form. The Holy Spirit never sees a problem in form. The Holy Spirit will never tell us, that is a problem, you really need to take care of that. The Spirit will simply offer us guidance that may be very practical. The Spirit may give us practical guidance that seems like it solves problems in form that we perceive. But from the Spirit's perspective, it's really just to help us reduce the fear in our mind so that we can relax, so that we can spend more of our time listening to Him, listening to that small, still voice within that really just wants to remind us that we're loved and that we're not guilty, that the separation from God did not happen, and therefore there really isn't anything to be concerned about. I remember one of my favorite lessons in the Course that I found it so impactful was, there is nothing to fear. It's one of the earlier lessons. I think it's in the first 50, I believe. And I remember when I first read that, it just really felt unbelievable to me in a way. It was like, really, is it true? Could it really be true that there's actually nothing to fear? And I just, in my heart, I knew that must be true, and that it was really a matter of me just opening to that and accepting that and relaxing into that experience, that I don't have to be concerned. I don't have to be afraid, that whatever I seem to be going through, whatever I seem to be perceiving and thinking is very, very serious in my life, isn't something I actually have to be concerned about. That if I look at it with Spirit, I can be reminded that there really isn't anything to fear. And I feel like that lesson has just sunk in deeper and deeper and deeper, to the point now where it just doesn't feel like fear it's not a major component anymore. It's like there's like the things that seemed very, very fearful before have just gotten smaller and smaller and smaller, and the experience of trust has become more dominant. Another thing I thought I'd share, and I put this in the description for this hangout, was one of the sections of the book Disappearance of the Universe, which some of you have probably heard of. It came out in the early 2000s, I think 2002 or 2003. I think it came out, and it's a book that was written by Gary Renard, where he claims to have had this experience where two ascended masters appeared on his couch and shared with him these deep teachings from A Course in Miracles. And there was controversy around whether he actually had the experience or whether he made it up. But I never seemed to care either way, because I found the teachings in the book to be so incredibly deep, and they answered my prayer for help at the time. I was really looking for some deeper wisdom at that time, when I think I came across the book actually the same year it came out. I was looking in a bookstore, and I was in some bookstore just looking in the spiritual section for something that would offer me a deeper understanding of of what's really going on in this universe and what's going on in my mind. And I felt like there must be some deeper answers that I'm not in touch with, because I still had the understanding. I had been studying the books Conversations with God prior to that, which were very, very helpful, but they still teach that God created this world, and so there was still some thoughts in my mind around, some conflict around, well, why is this world so full of conflict if God created it? Like, what went wrong, and why does it have to be that way? And if God created it like this, or if He created it at all, and why can't He just fix it? And then, I remember that day I was in the bookstore, and I saw this book sitting on the shelf called Disappearance of the Universe, and the moment I started reading it, I think my eyes were drawn to the idea very quickly that it was saying that this world is really a dream, and that I kept reading and reading and reading, and then pretty soon, early in the book, they say that actually God did not create this world, and God has nothing to do with it. And I remember reading that, I had to read that a few times. I couldn't really believe what I was reading at first. It was so radical, and yet something in my heart just leaped for joy. It was such a relief. It was so freeing, the idea that God didn't have anything to do with this world, and that it really was nothing more than a dream that I seemed to be having. I think I started laughing and crying at the same time. I remember sitting in that bookstore for hours reading the book, and just kind of reveling in this new perspective, this whole new paradigm that intuitively I could feel would be the path that I would be following for the rest of my life. So there's a paragraph in that book. And by the way, how's the sound at this point? Do you guys, is it still choppy, or is it sounding like it's coming through?
It's Good? Really great, Erik.
Okay. Okay, great. So, what was that again?
It's good for me too.
Okay, great. Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, so in that book, they really, the two teachers that Gary has, their names are Arten and Pursah. They go very deeply into the metaphysics of the Course, and explain things in very practical terms and very down-to-earth terms, and also very humorous terms. I found the book to be very, very funny, especially the kind of the back and forth between Gary and these two ascended masters. and after going into the metaphysics for several chapters, there's a chapter in the book called The Law of Forgiveness, and in that chapter they share a forgiveness thought process example. They first go very deeply into the idea of forgiveness, and they contrast it with the way that we normally think of forgiveness, which that forgiveness is normally thought about in the world's terms as kind of like a generous gift that you give somebody if they've done something wrong, and by being a spiritual person, quote unquote, you decide to kind of let them off the hook and forgive them, like sort of just decide that even though they did do something they shouldn't have done, or that they didn't do something they should have done, that you're going to forgive them and let them off the hook, and then they can feel innocent in your eyes again. And A Course in Miracles is basically teaching that this kind of forgiveness is very arrogant. There's actually a pamphlet that came through Helen Schuckman after she wrote A Course in Miracles. She wrote a couple more pamphlets. One's called the Song of Prayer, and the other one is called Psychotherapy, Purpose, Process, and Practice. And in the Song of Prayer, there's a section about forgiveness, and one of the subheadings in that chapter is called Forgiveness to Destroy, which is a pretty dramatic title, Forgiveness to Destroy. And this is what this is the name that Jesus gives to the way that we normally practice forgiveness in this world. It's like a disguise. It's disguised as something that's, quote, spiritual and holy and seems to be helpful, but it actually is no better than judgment. It's just like a spiritualized form of judgment, where you first make the error real. You first say, yes, something bad did indeed happen, and you're the one to blame. Or it could be that I'm the one to blame, as in the person I think I am. But because I don't want to hold a grudge against you or myself, I'm going to forgive and just kind of put a gloss over it, sort of like it's just say that it's okay. And this kind of forgiveness really doesn't work. It can seem to produce a temporary sense of relief, but it doesn't. It's as long as there's still a belief that something actually happened, then the guilt in the mind hasn't really been released. And so in that pamphlet, and also throughout the Course, when Jesus speaks about forgiveness, he's actually speaking about it as a shift in perception, where you're actually willing to accept that what you're perceiving on the screen, that what you are perceiving in terms of what your body or another body seem to do or not do, that whole dream scenario that seemed to happen actually didn't happen. That it actually didn't happen at all, but it was part of the dream. We could say it happened in the dream, but even to say it happened in the dream is like saying it happened in the illusion. And if the illusion is an illusion, then anything that seemed to happen in the illusion didn't actually happen at all, because an illusion is an illusion. So this is, obviously this isn't a conventional approach to how we perceive it. It's a means of really going in the mind and saying, okay, Spirit, this dream that I'm perceiving, it looks very, very real, and I think that what's happening out there and what has happened in my past, I really think it actually happened. But you're telling me that it didn't happen, and so I'm going to need some help in coming to that experience myself. It's not really helpful to just say it's an illusion. To just say the words, oh, it's all an illusion, and that didn't really happen. To just say those words can actually be unhelpful. It can actually just reinforce the problem if we're using that to cover over our feelings. We always want to be in touch with our feelings. That's like a deep key to true forgiveness, is allowing the feelings to come up, because if there is an upset and we don't allow the feelings to come up, then we're just sort of we're in a state of denial again. True forgiveness never denies the feelings that are coming up, and it doesn't just try to affirm that it's all an illusion, but what it does do is it opens the mind. It's a means of opening your mind to the Holy Spirit, and using whatever ideas from the Course seem to be helpful. I was going to share this idea that I shared in the description of this Google Hangout. There's that paragraph that I wrote in there, which was a forgiveness thought process example. That can be a helpful starting point. using an idea like that, or from the Course, it seems like it is kind of an affirmation, and we could say that the workbook of the Course is full of affirmations, but they're really just designed as a means of shifting the mind out of its conventional thinking and back into a willingness to really get in touch with the Holy Spirit. So I think what I'll do is I'll just go through that paragraph really, really briefly, and and share how I used it in my own forgiveness work. At this point, I don't really use any kind of technique. I feel like forgiveness is just, it's more involuntary now. It's become habitual. But in the beginning, it was incredibly helpful for me to use these ideas from the Course, to use the workbook lessons, and especially to use this paragraph from The Disappearance of the Universe. Pursah called it a forgiveness thought process example. So it's an example of how one would think forgiving thoughts. And basically what it says, the paragraph goes like this. And by the way, in this paragraph, the word you refers to any person or group of people or situation or anything that you perceive to be the cause of the problem. So let's just pretend like somebody cuts you off in traffic while you're driving down the freeway. One way that you could begin to get your mind back into peace, if you feel upset by that, would be to think of the person who cut you off, or maybe you can even see them in front of you on the freeway, and you would say, "You are not really there." That's the first line. You're not really there. So this is obviously a radical idea, like I've been sharing. It's just opening to the idea that what you perceive as being out there in the dream isn't really there. It's really a hallucination coming from the mind. So that's the first part. You're not really there. Then the second line is, if I thought that you were the cause of the problem. Actually, I'll just pull it up here so I have it. I used to have it memorized, and I have it mostly memorized now, but I'll pull it up just so I get it exactly as it is in the book. So you're not really there. If I think that you are guilty or the cause of the problem, and if I made you up, so this is an acknowledgement that I made you up. I made up all the dream images. Then the imagined guilt and fear must be in me. So this is another deep idea that is saying basically that the guilt and the fear that I perceive as outside of myself in other people is really coming from an ontological guilt and fear that's in me. It's in the mind that I am. And then it's in the mind that believes it's separated from God. And as a way of dealing with that guilt and fear, this mind that I think I am has projected it out into a world of time and space, and specifically onto bodies, that it calls people, and situations and places and things, so that it can have a scapegoat. That's really the purpose. The ego made this universe to be a scapegoat. It invented all these images for that one purpose, so that whenever the guilt would arise in the mind, it could have a means of projecting the guilt out and getting some relief, seemingly. It seems like if we can blame other people, then we can feel like we're not the guilty one. But in truth, this kind of projection actually reinforces the guilt in our mind. It doesn't really get rid of it. Projection is like a means of trying to get rid of something, of throwing something out of the mind, so that it can seem like, okay, it's not here, I don't have to deal with it, I've gotten rid of it. I just watched a video with David Hoffmeister where he was speaking about how in the old days, like in the Jewish tradition, he was speaking about the origin of the term scapegoating, and that it came from this ritual where they would actually get a goat, like in the village, where everyone lived, once a year or every few months or so, they would get a goat, and then the priest of the village would basically take the sins of all the people and put them on the head of the goat. Symbolically, he would take the sins off the people and say, now all your sins are on the goat's head. And then they would run the goat out of town. They would get the goat to leave, and maybe they even would run it off a cliff. I'm not sure. But the whole idea was that they could get rid of their sins by putting the sins on the goat and getting rid of the goat. And so the term scapegoating began. And now, it's just, we can see it happening in our psychology all the time. We're always looking for someone or something to blame for the upsets that we go through. And Jesus is saying this isn't going to work. It's not going to work to get rid of the guilt. You actually have to go back to the source of it in the mind and forgive, which is what this paragraph is about. So I'll just go back from the top. You're not really there. If I think that you, and in this case maybe the person who cut us off in traffic, if I think you are guilty or the cause of the problem, and if I made you up, then the imagined guilt and fear must be in me. So now we're acknowledging where the guilt actually is coming from. And then the next line is, since the separation from God never occurred, and we can just open up to that idea, that since the separation from God never occurred, I forgive, quote, both of us for what we haven't really done. And it puts both in quotes because when you open up to the idea that the separation never happened, you can see that the duality isn't really real. There isn't really me and you. It's all one image. The whole cosmos is one projection. So since the separation from God never occurred, I forgive both of us for what we haven't really done. Now there's only innocence, and I join with the Holy Spirit in peace. So yeah, this is a wonderful paragraph to memorize. I would carry this around. I first wrote it down and I'd carry it around on a little piece of paper for months until I memorized it, and then I would just basically recite it to myself, and not just recite it, but to really contemplate it, to really go deep into it, to be committed to having the experience that it points to. And I think, like I said, all of us may have our own ways of getting into this experience. It may be through one of the course lessons, like there's nothing to fear, or the first lesson, nothing I see means anything. If there's any particular lesson that you've found to be helpful, that you've resonated with, that you've really, every once in a while there's a lesson that just really hits us, and we can feel the power in it, and there's something about it that just really works for our individual mind, our seemingly individual mind. And those are good to take note of, to maybe write down and keep on a little piece of paper and use anytime there's an upset. Because this is the practice now. We want peace of mind. We deserve peace of mind. We really deserve to have the full experience of being loved all the time. And nothing short of God's love is ever going to satisfy us, but we're not going to experience it unless we're willing to be wrong about everything that we believe. And so it can seem like the most difficult part is when we get triggered, when we get something upsets us, that the most difficult part can be just to even kind of stop ourselves from staying on the ego train of thought, which would have us continue to blame or try to justify things or try to fix things or figure out or analyze. And I think that we just start to do that quicker and quicker. I think in the beginning, as we practice the Course, we may find ourselves getting upset and staying upset for, maybe long periods of time, maybe a whole couple days go by until we realize that we got triggered and that it's a forgiveness opportunity. And then as we get better at practicing, as our desire to awaken and for that inner peace gets stronger, we seem to be able to do that more quickly. Maybe it doesn't take a whole couple days before we forgive, but maybe it happens, in just a couple hours, and then pretty soon within an hour, maybe then within a few minutes, and we get to the point where it just starts to happen quicker and quicker. And it's just so worth it, because every time we do practice forgiveness, every time we do stop and just tune in and say, okay, I'm upset here and I need some help, and then start practicing the idea that we've written down, whether it's that paragraph that I just read or something else from the Course in Miracles or any idea that may have just come to us from the Spirit. We feel the value. We feel the value of that peace that it brings us, and it begins to become the most important thing in our life. So, yeah, that's what I felt to share about true forgiveness, and I think I'll just pause now and see if either of you, Anthony or Will, have anything that you felt to share, and if you do, feel free.
Yeah, sure. I might have some questions mixed with something to share. So, obviously, this forgiveness thing is the biggest thing of the Course. So my first thing is, so on one hand, it seems like Jesus is trying to explain to us logically all the reasons why we should be forgiven. What it's hard to me, it's that none of these reasons really seem to make any sense to our minds of human beings. So I've gotten to the point of thinking that actually Jesus is only asking us to make a leap into faith. Okay, believe to this dogma. What you're doing, as you said before, is you're projecting what it's within your mind onto the world outside, because the only reason why the world was made was for us to throw on all of our guilt that we have buried in our subconscious mind. So for me, in order to apply forgiveness, which is a radical process that goes against everything that I've ever learned in my life, everything that I've ever grown up with, where I was told, to defend yourself, to attack, to stand up for your right, and all of these things, which somehow I never settled with when I was a little kid. But that's what I've grown up with. So I kind of, and I don't think I'm the only one. Everybody grows up with these kinds of beliefs. And now that I'm asked, I think that I'm being asked to make this huge leap, which I have, which in actuality I have decided to do. When I was a little kid, I've grown up in Catholic home, although they were not practicing, but I went to school and they were Christian school, and they always taught us about forgiveness, the Christian forgiveness, the Catholic forgiveness. And I said, he couldn't be talking about me. He's not asking me to do. I'm not. This is stuff for priests or maybe for saints, because this is impossible. You can't turn the other cheek to somebody that's doing something. So I always thought that's not applicable. Then I came across the course, and when I started to read it, I realized, I thought, okay, this isn't written by a person. These things are out of this world. This is coming from something else. The course really spoke to me deep inside, and so I decided that I would take in anything it would say. But anytime I try to understand if there's a reason, a logical reason behind, a logical reason under the point of view of a cultural way of our mind, the way our mind works, there isn't any. So, and also in the little paragraph that you read, I can't quite remember exactly the sequence, but it says, at one point it says, and since I made you up, and this since I made you up, where does it come from? How do I know that I made you up? I am taking the words of Jesus from the book, and I'm taking them as true. So, all right, so I do want to take the word of Jesus as true, but where is the difference? Where is the start being different between saying something just to say it and saying something because it comes from a deep know? When I say knowledge, I talk about the deep, absolute knowledge, the one that comes from spirit and everything. And so, and here I am facing all the time, am I doing it right or am I doing it wrong? Because I do practice a lot of forgiveness, and I do use different routines, different techniques, different things that I repeat in my mind, always trying to experiment new ones, and then for sometimes I try to sit well with one, and I keep repeating that one, and then for a while I have to switch to something else. So, but my fear, and I guess that's the ego coming in and trying to trick you, to tell you you're not doing good, you haven't understood anything. But the doubt, it does come up. The doubt does come up that I think, oh, maybe I'm just not doing it right. Maybe I'm not deeply understanding that what I'm doing, why I'm doing what I'm doing. Why am I attacking the person? Why am I judging the person? Why am I getting upset at this person? I see this person, what this person is doing, and I know that I need to separate what the person is doing from what's beyond the person, which is the face of Christ. And I also know that I could never see the face of Christ through these eyes if I don't take again that leap that goes beyond the sight of my eyes and just get in connection with my spirit in that moment. And only then I can look beyond the body that's in front of me and connect with God. And I guess maybe that's what I'm required to do. And if I am required to do so, it's quite difficult to do it in the midst of whatever happens in the world, while you need to be discussing, arguing with a person, responding to a person, even if you don't have to really argue, but you have to respond. So someone you have to pay attention. At the same time, I need to really call forth for some quiet and stillness. Like I should go away and close my eyes and relax a little bit. At times with smaller issues, I guess I'm able to do it. Some of the times I don't. Sometimes I am able, but then if the argument continues and continues and continues, and somehow ego finds a way that comes right back out to and attack back. It just requires huge vigilance, moment to moment. And the peace that you were talking about, that I do feel at times, it's an instant of peace. The ego is right back there. So at least that's my experience. Sometimes I have a prolonged experience of peace. Sometimes I have a very brief experience because the mind shuttling starts right back. Um, so yeah, that's it. I mean, lots of doubts in my curiosity, knowing if within all the confusion of all the things I said, if anything that I'm doing right or wrong. That's it.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that's really common for the doubt to come up about, am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? Um, I think that's to be expected. I mean, it's obviously we understand that the ego doesn't want us to be even considering these ideas as being possibly true. So it just does everything it can to sabotage us. I'm going to go ahead and did you have more to share, or I was just going to put you on mute so that there's less feedback for the moment.
Sure.
But yeah, one thing you shared that I felt to address at the end there is, yeah, I think when there seems to be a conflict going on with another person, like an argument, that's when the rubber hits the road. That's where we have the most opportunity to really practice and be vigilant, and where there's actually a motivation. Did you have something you want to say? Hang on. I just want to sit down. Oh, sure. Yeah. My friend Jen is here with me. Yeah, that's when there's a motivation to be vigilant, because it doesn't feel good to be in an argument with someone, to be in a conflict, and these are, I think, I was guided to be in a marriage with someone who basically thought and perceived the world in a completely opposite way for me, it seemed. And so there were so many opportunities for forgiveness, for being humble, for noticing that there were these decision points where it seemed like a conflict would begin, and for those of you who've been in a marriage relationship, it doesn't really matter what kind of relationship actually, but it seems that in those what the Course calls special love relationships, that things can come up very, very intensely, and it seems often very irrational. Like it can't even be understood as to why a conflict is coming up. I remember Armel and I would have these conflicts arise about things that seemed completely irrational. I couldn't understand what she was upset about. She couldn't understand why I didn't understand her. And it just felt like we were aliens to each other. We had no way of connecting. And this for me was the greatest phase of practice, because I had a good grasp on what the Course was teaching, and I was very, very committed to it. So and yet there was this strong temptation still to kind of go into the argument, to try to find a solution on the level of form, to try to understand what the other person was saying. And what I discovered is that it's never ever going to get solved by trying to figure it out, or by even trying to understand. I mean, it seems like a good thing to really listen to people and to try to understand what they're going through. But actually, there's a section on true empathy in the Course where he says that you have to refuse to understand suffering. As long as you think you understand your brother's suffering in whatever form it is appearing, then you're really just reinforcing it. You're just as caught in the delusion as your brother is. So with forgiveness, the first step is really to pull our mind, inward, and really get in touch with what we're feeling, and be open to just having a different perspective. The spirit has to somehow we have to get in touch with this wisdom that is deep within us, but that doesn't come from us, as us personally. It comes from the Spirit, and it's a total reversal of the traditional way of doing things. And you mentioned, I think when you shared what you just shared, you mentioned how sometimes you feel like you have to go away, and you have to, maybe regroup. And I think that's true. I think that's helpful. Sometimes we do need to step away from a conversation if it becomes too heated and we're really caught up in it. I think as we get better at forgiveness, we can also just learn to pause and maybe even close our eyes. And it may seem disjunctive. I mean, when we really give our relationships over to the Spirit, it can look quite awkward. Like if we're in the middle of a conversation with someone and it seems heated and we suddenly close our eyes and go inward, it's, the other person may say, "What the hell are you doing?" And the ego may come through them very, very strongly and try to do everything it can to pull us back out onto the screen, to get us to engage again, because the ego loves the conflict. But we just have to be really, really committed and really committed to peace of mind, and saying, okay, there must be a deeper solution here. There must be a deeper perspective. We definitely don't want to go into just trying to say, oh, it's all an illusion, and you're an illusion, or we don't want to try to just mask our feelings with metaphysical ideas, but we do want to be willing to use the ideas just to kind of be more authentic with ourselves and feel what we're feeling. So yeah, I think you're doing great, and I think that it's just a matter of practicing and experimenting, just using the ideas and experimenting, and always remembering that the most important thing is to let the feelings come up, to not hide them, to let them come up, but not to necessarily express them with anger, but just to stay in touch with them and then join with the Spirit in our mind to move through them. So, yeah, I'm actually feeling to end the class at this point. But yeah, I'd love to join with you guys again if you feel to go into these ideas more deeply. I might do it. This is such a deep topic. I feel that there could be like a series on it almost. I think that it's really, like you said, it's really the core of what the course is all about. It's all about true forgiveness, and yeah, the more deeply we can understand, what true forgiveness is and how to apply it in our lives, then the happier we are.
Yeah,
so,
Erik, I would love that.
Yeah, did either of you have any?
Erik, I would love that if you could do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for joining me on this call, and for those of you who are watching, and I'll see you again soon.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony.
Eric.
Thank you, Will.
Bye, Will.
Thank you, Erik.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, Anthony.